My name is Michael Harris. I am 42 years old and have been working as a freelance graphic artist for the last 15 years in a peaceful suburb near Orlando, Florida. I have created a comfortable life for myself, nothing extravagant but sufficient. My home workspace faces a small lake, and I have always found calm in the steady rhythm of my work, crafting visual narratives, recognizing patterns, and solving problems through design. It is a systematic type of work that fits my character well. For 8 years, I shared this life with my wife, Emily Carter. She was 38, full of life, and had a unique ability to fill any space with energy that I greatly admired. We met at a local art festival where I was displaying some of my creations. She was there with her family, and her laughter instantly drew my attention. We began dating, got married 2 years afterward, and I believed we had formed a strong bond together. Emily came from a close Hispanic family. Her mother, Linda, was the family head who made sure everyone stayed on track. Then there was George Carter, her stepfather, who was 80 years old and had been with the family for more than 20 years. George was a former mechanic, a reserved man who kept to himself, but always shared a kind word with others. Recently, he had been managing some health problems: diabetes, high blood pressure, common issues that come with growing older. Yet, he remained sharp, still drove his vintage Chevy truck to the store, and looked after his small workshop in the garage. To be honest, I was never completely accepted by the Carter family. Not exactly turned away, but there was always this feeling that I was the outsider looking in. Maybe it was because I was naturally reserved, or perhaps because I wasn't Hispanic like them. I spoke Spanish fairly well and tried to join in family gatherings, but I always felt more like a courteous visitor than one of their own. Emily would assure me that her family just needed a bit more time to open up to newcomers. I chose to believe her. If you enjoy tales of cold-hearted revenge and thrilling plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. Brand new stories you have never heard before come out here every day, each one more captivating than the previous. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I was finishing up a logo design for a local eatery when Emily came into my office. She appeared different, restless almost, with a hint of excitement about something. "Michael, we need to talk about Thanksgiving," she said while sitting on the edge of my desk. I looked away from my screen. "What about it?" "I thought we were going to your mom's place as usual." "We are," she answered, "but some things have changed." She picked up one of my design drafts without really paying attention to it. "George has been having some problems. Mom thinks he needs extra care, someone to watch over him during the holiday." I saved my work and turned fully to her. "Is he okay? Does he need to see a doctor?" No, it's nothing that serious," she replied. "He's just, getting older. Sometimes he becomes disoriented and often forgets to take his medication. His mother is anxious about leaving him alone even for a short period." She placed the sketch down and gazed at me with those deep eyes that had first drawn my attention. "I thought perhaps you could stay with him while the rest of us focus on cooking and getting everything ready. You two get along well, and it would truly be a great help for the family." Something seemed strange about the request, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Naturally, I replied, "If that's what George needs, I'm glad to help." Emily gave a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Perfect. I knew you would understand. You're always so reliable with situations like these." Looking back now, I realize that was the moment everything began to fall apart. But at that time, I was just trying to be a supportive husband and son-in-law. I had no clue I was about to learn how replaceable I had become in my own marriage. Thanksgiving morning came with gray clouds and a light drizzle. Typical Florida weather, uncertain if it wanted to be winter or not. I drove my Honda Civic through familiar streets toward the Carter family residence, a modest ranch-style house in a subdivision constructed in the 1980s. I had made that trip countless times over the years, but something was different this time. I arrived at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, just as Emily had asked. The house seemed unusually silent. No cars were in the driveway except for George's old Chevy truck parked beneath the carport. I picked up the pumpkin pie I had bought from Publix and headed to the front door, expecting the familiar scent of turkey and the usual hustle and bustle of family getting ready. Instead, I found nothing but silence. I knocked and waited, but there was no response. Using the key Emily had given me years ago, I let myself in. "Hello, Emily, Linda." My voice echoed down the empty hallway. That is when I noticed George sitting alone in his worn leather recliner in the living room, staring at a muted television. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes seemed clearer than they had been for weeks. "Michael," he said, his voice heavy with a tone I had never heard before, "I was wondering when you would get here." I asked, placing the pie on the coffee table. "Where is everyone?" George pointed weakly towards the dining room table. On it, there was a note. I found a single sheet of paper, folded once with my name written on the front in Emily's handwriting. I opened and read it aloud. "Michael, we decided to take a last-minute trip for the holiday. George needs someone to care for him and ensure he takes his medications. There is food in the refrigerator, and his pills are on the kitchen counter. We will be back in a few days." I read it twice, then looked at George. "A trip?" "What kind of trip?" I asked. He replied softly, "The kind where they do not invite the old man, or the husband, it seems." A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I pulled out my phone and called Emily, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried once more with the same outcome. I sent a message. "Got your note. What is happening? Call me." No reply. I spent the next hour calling every member of the Carter family I had contacts for. Linda, Emily's brother Miguel, her cousin Sophia. Every single call went straight to voicemail. It was as if they had all disappeared at the same time. "Don't waste your energy," George said when he saw me desperately dialing. "They are not going to pick up." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Sit down, Michael. We need to have a chat." I sat on the couch opposite him, my thoughts spinning. George leaned in, his aged hands folded together. "How long have you known my stepdaughter?" he asked. 8 years. "Why do you ask? And in those 8 years, how many times has she mentioned her former boyfriend Liam Foster?" The name hit me like a punch in the chest. Liam Foster. I had heard that name only once, about 3 years ago, when Emily had briefly mentioned him during a talk about old friends. She said he was someone she had dated briefly in college, nothing serious. "Once," I answered slowly. "Maybe twice." "She has been in contact with him for 6 months, George said. Phone calls, texts, emails. I know because I have been monitoring." I stared at him. "Watching. Michael, I may be 80 years old, but I am neither blind nor foolish. When someone begins to examine your financial files, questions your will, and suddenly takes a strong interest in your medical visits, you start paying attention." George's tone was calm, yet I could detect a spark of frustration in his gaze. Emily had been scheming for several months, and only yesterday did I finally uncover her plan. He reached into the side pocket of his armchair and pulled out a small notebook, the type with a black composition cover commonly used by students. The pages were covered with his meticulous handwriting. For nearly 4 months, I have been keeping a detailed record. Every discussion, each document she requested to review, every instance she accompanied me to medical appointments and insisted on speaking privately with the doctors. He turned through a few pages. "She has been working to establish herself as my main caregiver, despite my not needing one. She has informed my physicians that I suffer from memory issues and sometimes forget to take my medications." "Are you?" I asked. "Absolutely not. I take 2 blood pressure pills and 1 diabetes medicine at the exact same time every day for more than 5 years. My mind remains as sharp as ever." He gave me a look that confirmed his statement. However, if someone aims to portray an elderly man as someone losing his mental abilities and needing assistance managing his responsibilities, that narrative is surprisingly easy to create. I felt like I was trying to piece together a puzzle with many parts missing. "George, what does this have to do with Emily not being here today?" "Because today was meant to be the day she persuaded you to help her transfer me to a nursing facility. Today was supposed to be that day. The day she officially became my legal guardian, she gained control over my Social Security, my pension, and my savings account." He closed the notebook and fixed his gaze on me without wavering. "Instead, she is on a cruise to the Caribbean with Liam Foster. I saw the booking confirmation just yesterday when she accidentally left her laptop open. The room seemed to be spinning. A cruise lasting 7 days, leaving from Port Canaveral this very morning. Royal Caribbean, the Mariner of the Seas. That's the exact ship." George's tone was calm and factual, yet I could perceive the tension beneath. They figured they would leave the old man with the clueless husband, and by the time they returned, the paperwork would be waiting for my signature. I sat there absorbing this news, feeling like someone had just told me that gravity had ceased to exist. "My wife," The woman I had shared a bed with for 8 years, the woman who had wept when we discussed the possibility of someday having children, had left me to care for her stepfather while she enjoyed a romantic trip with another man. "Michael," George said softly, "I am sorry you are discovering this in such a cruel way, but you need to understand something else. This situation is not only about her betrayal, she is also stealing from me, manipulating my medical decisions, and plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent so she can take full control of my life." I looked at this 80-year-old man who had treated me kindly for 8 years and felt something stir inside me. It was not anger, not yet. It was something else entirely. Colder, more deliberate. The same precise, strategic mindset I used while tackling a complicated design challenge, breaking the issue into smaller, manageable parts. "George, tell me, what exactly do you want me to do?" I asked. The following days unfolded in an unusual rhythm. I moved into the Carter residence to stay with George, and what I uncovered during that time completely altered my understanding of my marriage and my wife's family. George was not the confused, fading elderly man Emily had described. Instead, he was sharp, systematic, and had been diligently keeping detailed records of everything that happened to him during the past year. Every morning, he brewed his coffee in the same ceramic mug he had used for many years, took his medication precisely at 8 o'clock, and then revealed another part of the mystery. "Take a look at this," he mentioned one Friday morning, as he slid a folder across the kitchen table. Inside were copies of medical records, insurance papers, and summaries of appointments. Each time Emily accompanied me to visit Dr. Martinez, she insisted on having a private conversation with him. She reported that I was experiencing episodes of confusion, sometimes forgetting my location or the date. I carefully examined those documents. Dr. Martinez's notes included reports from the patient's stepdaughter about increasing mental decline and the family's concerns about my ability to manage medications alone. But George's actual test results showed cognitive function consistent with someone of his age. She was compiling a medical paper trail, I observed, noticing the pattern. It resembled watching someone establish a brand identity, carefully shaping a story through consistent and repeated messages. Exactly. Then George Carter revealed another folder. This one included bank statements, Social Security files, and legal documents. 3 months earlier, she brought me papers to sign, claiming it was merely to update my emergency contact details. But in reality, she was attempting to add herself as a joint account holder on my checking account. "Did you sign them?" "Absolutely not. I may be elderly, but I'm not gullible." George's eyes showed a flash of anger. Yet she persisted, arguing that it would make things simpler if something happened to me, that Linda was becoming too old to manage financial affairs. I began to grasp the extent of what Emily Carter had been trying to do. This was not just betrayal, it was deliberate financial abuse targeting the elderly. And I had been the perfect cover story, the devoted son-in-law who would naturally step in to care for George when the family required it. "George, do you realize how much money we are discussing here? My pension after 35 years at the Ford factory, Social Security, and about $43,000 in savings, plus this house, fully paid. Not a fortune, but enough to attract their interest." He leaned back in his chair. "Emily has been struggling financially. That boutique she started. Last year she was losing a significant amount of money. She had been requesting loans from Linda, but Linda did not have much to offer. That sheds light on certain facts. Emily had been anxious about finances recently, yet whenever I tried to assist or inquire about the specifics, she would dismiss me, claiming she had everything under control. I had assumed it was simply pride, not wanting to trouble me with her personal financial matters. On Saturday, I chose to conduct my own investigation. I drove to Emily's boutique, a small store in a shopping strip focused on fashionable women's apparel. The closed sign was displayed, but through the window I noticed the shelves were nearly bare. A handwritten note on the door said closed for holiday week. I contacted the landlord, whose number appeared on a small plaque beside the entrance. I said, "Hello, I am calling about the retail space where Emily's closet is located. I might be interested in renting it." The landlord replied that the space would soon be available. The current tenant was overdue on rent for 3 months. They were starting the eviction process the following week. Being 3 months behind on rent was a substantial amount to owe for a small enterprise. I thanked the landlord and ended the call, feeling another puzzle piece fall into place. Later that night, I met with George to devise our next plan. We had been recording everything, but it was essential to approach the situation carefully. George had maintained records, yet we needed to ensure all was legally correct. I have been reflecting on this, I said, and I believe we must bring a lawyer into the matter, not only for the financial concerns, but also due to the medical deception. What Emily has been doing to your medical files is a serious offense. George replied, I know a reliable lawyer, Bill Hendress. He took care of my will a few years ago, a trustworthy man who understands elder law well. On Monday morning, we contacted Bill's office. I explained the situation, and he agreed to meet with us later that day. Bill appeared to be a man in his 60s with gray hair and a composed presence that comes from many years of managing family legal emergencies. After examining George's documents, Bill noted, "This happens more frequently than you might imagine. Exploiting seniors financially is an increasing issue, particularly when relatives are involved. The element of medical fraud makes this especially grave." I asked, "What steps can we take?" He answered, "We need to safeguard George's assets right away. We can request a restraining order to stop anyone from accessing his accounts or making medical decisions for him. Also, reporting this to Adult Protective Services and possibly the FBI's Elder Justice Initiative is crucial." George raised his eyebrows upon hearing the FBI's involvement. Bill explained, "Financial crimes targeting elderly people receive serious attention nowadays. Crimes like wire fraud, mail fraud, and healthcare fraud are federal offenses. If we establish an intent to deceive, the consequences could include imprisonment." A chilling sense of satisfaction settled over me. This was no longer simply about revenge. It had transformed into a quest for justice concerning George Carter and holding Emily Carter accountable for her deeds. "There is more, Bill," I added. "If your wife has utilized the Postal Service or digital communications to promote this plan, additional federal allegations could arise, and if she coordinated with others, such as that former boyfriend, that might lead to conspiracy charges." We dedicated the following 2 hours meticulously examining George's paperwork, arranging everything chronologically, and building a thorough case file. By the time we left Bill's office, a well-defined strategy was in place. "How much time do you expect this will require?" George inquired as we drove home. I replied, "These processes take time, but that actually benefits us. Emily and her family believe they are returning to a confused elderly man and an uninformed husband. Instead, they will face a federal probe ready and waiting." That evening, I finally permitted myself to reflect on what this meant for my marriage. 8 years of my life vanished. The woman I once cherished and trusted had been methodically plotting to deceive her own stepfather while manipulating me as an unaware participant. The betrayal was total, yet, oddly, I did not feel crushed. I felt determined and clear-headed, as if I had been working on a design project for years without grasping the client's actual intent. And now, suddenly, everything fell into place. George and I had spent the weekend forming an unexpected partnership. Two men who had been rejected by those they once trusted. Yet, we refused to remain silent. We intended to ensure that when Emily returned from her romantic trip, she would face consequences far beyond her expectations. The Mariner of the Seas arrived back in Port Canaveral on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after it had set sail. I was certain of this because I had been monitoring the ship's progress online, tracking its journey across the Caribbean and back to Florida. George and I had made the most of that week. By the time Emily's crew docked, we had already obtained restraining orders, submitted extensive reports to Adult Protective Services, and forwarded a complete case file to the FBI's Elder Justice Initiative. Bill Hicks had acted diligently and swiftly. George's assets were secured, his medical documents were marked for review, and federal agents had opened an investigation into Emily Carter and Liam Foster. I was seated in George's kitchen, sipping coffee and examining design plans on my laptop, when I heard car doors slam in the driveway. It was Wednesday afternoon, and they had returned. "Are you prepared for this?" George asked calmly, surprisingly composed for someone about to face those who had harmed him. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, shutting my laptop. The front door opened, and Emily's voice rang out cheerfully. "George, Michael, we're back." She stepped into the kitchen, looking sun-kissed and at ease, her hair lighter from the Caribbean sun. Following behind her were Linda, Miguel, and Sophia. They all appeared as if they had enjoyed a fantastic holiday. Emily approached and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek as though nothing unusual had occurred. "How did everything go?" she asked casually. "Did George behave himself?" "We had an amazing time," I replied. "George has been sharing many captivating stories with me." "Oh, you know how he is," Linda said laughingly. "Sometimes he mixes things up. I hope none of his tales caused you any worry." George rose slowly from his chair. "I'm not mixing anything up, Linda. My mind is perfectly sharp." There was something in his voice that made everyone fall silent. Emily glanced between us nervously, a hint of concern flashing in her eyes. "Is everything all right?" she inquired. "That depends," I responded. "How was your cruise with Liam?" Emily's face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" "The Royal Caribbean cruise for 7 days, aboard the Mariner of the Seas. Does that ring a bell?" Miguel stepped forward. "Michael, I believe there is some sort of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," George cut in sharply. "I saw the booking confirmation. I know exactly where you went and why you left us here." Linda's voice trembled as she said, "George, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" he said, while walking over to the kitchen counter to grab a manila folder. "Is this paranoia?" He opened it and began reading aloud. "Medical fraud, financial elder abuse, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. These are the charges that Adult Protective Services and the FBI is currently conducting an investigation." The quietness in the kitchen was overwhelming. I observed as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on each person present. "You cannot be serious," Emily whispered. "Absolutely serious," I responded. "George has been meticulously recording every detail for several months. Your attempts to seize control of his finances, the falsehoods you told his doctors, and your schemes to have him declared incapable. All of it is here, carefully documented and reported to the appropriate authorities." "We were only trying to help him," Sophia objected. "Help him by stealing from him." George's voice was rigid. "Help him by spreading lies about his mental health. Help him by planning to place him in a care facility so you could gain control of his money." Emily slumped into a chair, her gaze fixed on the folder held by George. "Michael, please. You don't realize the financial strain I have been under, the boutique, the debts." "I understand perfectly well," I said. "Your business is failing. You are 3 months behind on rent. So your solution was to defraud your stepfather and use me as a shield." "And what about Liam?" George questioned. "Where does he fit into this?" "Liam knows nothing about any of this," Emily hurried to say. "Really?" "Because according to the cruise reservation, he paid for both your tickets with a credit card. That implicates him financially in a conspiracy to commit elder abuse, which the FBI will likely view far differently than you do." Linda was now sobbing. "We never intended for things to escalate this much. We only believed—" "You believed you could trick an elderly man and a trusting husband," I said. "You assumed we would be easy targets." Over the course of the next 60 minutes, the entire extent of their scheme was revealed. Their plan was to use Thanksgiving as the moment to convince me to assist in moving George Carter into a nursing facility. They had documents prepared to appoint Linda as George's guardian, granting her control over his finances. The cruise was meant to celebrate their triumph, paid for by George's savings. Instead, they came back to discover George had received exceptional medical care from his genuine doctor, who verified his mental faculties were intact. They found that protective orders had been filed. George's accounts were frozen pending an inquiry, and federal agents were eager to question them. "What happens now?" Michael asked. "Now you wait," Bill Hendrick replied. He had arrived half an hour earlier, having been informed that the family had returned. "You wait for the investigations to finish. You wait for criminal charges to be brought and hope that the federal prosecutors decide to be lenient." "And what about my marriage?" Emily asked, tears glistening in her eyes as she looked at me. I examined her face, the woman with whom I had spent 8 years of my life, the one who had planned to ruin an innocent elderly man to resolve her financial troubles. "I filed for divorce yesterday," I said. "You will receive the papers soon." One after another, they departed. The house felt heavy with silence as Linda, Miguel, and Sophia all stepped outside without a word, the reality of their situation finally settling in. Emily was the last to leave. At the door, she said to Michael, "I am sorry. "Truly, I never intended for you to be hurt." I replied, "No, you never aimed to hurt me. Your plan was always to harm George. You wanted to steal from him and then abandon him. My feelings were never part of your equation." She nodded, unable to meet my gaze, and then walked out to her car. After they left, the house felt strange, quieter, yet somehow purer. George and I sat in the living room, trying to absorb everything that had just occurred. "How are you feeling?" I asked him. "Exhausted," he answered, "but relieved. For the first time in many months, I finally feel secure in my own home." The legal battle lasted for 8 months. Emily, Linda, and Miguel each faced charges of conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. Liam Foster was charged as an accomplice after it was uncovered that he knew about Emily's financial troubles and actively assisted in planning what they thought would be a celebratory cruise. The boutique was confiscated as part of asset forfeiture. During this ordeal, George's health actually got better. Free from the constant worry about his family's next move, he started walking again, took up gardening once more, and even began dating a widow named Martha, who lived 3 blocks away. As for me, this experience taught me something vital about myself. During those months, I discovered I was far stronger than I had ever imagined. I realized I could defend what was right, even when it meant sacrificing everything I had believed I wanted. I came to understand that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you should be most cautious about. I also learned that revenge does not always mean getting even. Sometimes true justice is about ensuring the truth is revealed. I still live in my house by the lake and continue working as a graphic designer. However, I now also volunteer with the Elder Justice Coalition, assisting other families facing situations like the one George and I went through. I have become skilled at spotting the warning signs of financial elder abuse, and have helped many families safeguard their loved ones from those who exploit aging as an opportunity. George and I remain close friends. We share dinner every Sunday, and he has taught me more about resilience and dignity than any school ever could. He is now 81, still sharp, independent, and driving that old Chevy truck to the grocery store. People sometimes ask if I regret how things played out, or if I wish I had handled everything differently. My answer is no. I regret not recognizing the signs sooner and not protecting George earlier. Yet, I do not regret standing up for what was right, even when it meant losing everything I thought I had built. Truth has a way of coming out eventually. When it does, you can choose to be the one who reveals it or the one who ignores it. You can choose to be the one who reveals the truth or the one who attempts to hide it. I know exactly which role I would prefer to play. If you found this story engaging, please give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.